And if you are ready, you may start now.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Stacy Teet, and I'm a master's student here in the GIST program. Today, I'll be sharing with you the results of my research project, a land suitability analysis for viticulture in the Fredericksburg AVA. But before I do, let's talk briefly about why I chose this topic. Oh no, I'm not advancing. Okay, sorry. This project, or one like it, has been on my mind for more than 2 decades. You see, I became a geospatial analyst, but we didn't call it that way back then, at the age of 18 when I moved to California. By 21, I was stationed in Italy, where table wine was free, but you had to pay for a glass of water. From there, I moved around to the Balkans, Croatia, Germany, Africa, Portugal, all the wine regions, and back again, working side by side with my French counterparts in a commercial imagery ground station. We spent a lot of time discussing wine. I visited many vineyards, and somewhere along the way, I started to imagine what it would be like to have my own vineyard someday. My work travels gave me the perfect opportunity to do research. When I found out my family was moving to Texas, I promised my coworkers if I ever completed a master's degree, my thesis would be dedicated to finding a place in Texas where I could grow quality wine. I quickly discovered the scope of the project I had in mind was better suited towards a doctorate degree, but I've scaled it down to the best of my ability with the time allowed. Let's see what I came up with. I condensed the study area to a region designated by the Alcohol, Tobacco, Tax, and Trade Bureau as Fredericksburg in the Hill Country AVA. This small area covers 112 square miles and has become pretty popular over the last decade. It's located in the heart of the Texas Hill Country, a region Texans and wine enthusiasts like to consider a smaller Napa Valley. Millions of visitors flock here each year, and they spend a lot of money. There's one population center, the town of Fredericksburg, one of those charming historic old towns with plenty of shops along the main street, and lately the addition of wineries and tasting rooms. The Fredericksburg AVA had only a handful of them a few years ago, but there's now close to 50 operating within the study area. What makes this area so special, besides how lovely it is, you can see on the map, I've included the vineyards, and most of them exist on the 2 main roads leading in and out of the town. The area we call the Hill Country is a lot different from the rest of Texas. The Hill Country refers to the purple circle in the center of the tectonic map and the gray outlined area on the right-hand map. This entire area is a plateau called the Edwards Plateau, created by the Balcones Fault during billions of years ago during the Precambrian era. Those dark and purple areas inside the red rectangle are some of the oldest soils in Texas. They also date back to the Precambrian era. The hilly terrain located on this plateau was formed from stream erosion of limestone during the Cretaceous period. Fredericksburg AVA, which falls entirely inside of Gillespie County, has these old soils, plenty of limestone, granite, and dolomite, but also younger alluvial soils along the river. This mix, along with the added elevation from the uplift of the plateau, makes this the ideal region for wine growing, but it's not quite that easy. At first glance, climate data also suggests the AVA would be ideal for wine growing. Average temperatures range from 57 to 87 degrees Fahrenheit, and the region gets about 30 to 32 inches of rainfall each year. But what climate normals can't tell you is how their culmination is really just a sum of frequent extremes. Summer temperatures here are hot, and winters are frigid. The region is threatened with environmental factors like hail, high winds, late spring frost, record droughts, and severe thunderstorms. Just one of those factors could wipe out an entire year's crops, and this area faces those challenges in a single growing season. The winter storm of 2021 wiped out more than half of the Texas wine grapes. Aside from these environmental challenges, most of the new folks starting vineyards here are doing it as a second career and have little agricultural experience. On top of that, wine has only been grown commercially seriously in Texas since the late 1970s. This puts Texas hundreds of years behind in historical research from old world wine growing regions. Texas A&M says the number one mistake new owners are making is selecting the wrong sites for their vineyards. This can be a monumentally expensive decision. So when looking at ways this project could assist new wine growers, it became clear pinpointing which factors would have the most impact on whether a site was suitable or not was a major concern. Another thing to note, while most wine growing regions specialize in a few specific grape varietals, Texas is still trying to figure out which grape varieties grow best. Aside from late frost and extreme summers, this area is also heavily plagued with Pierce's disease, a virus only cured from killing the vine. Growers in Texas are experimenting with disease-resistant grapes, but most vineyards are trying several varietals at once. On the 500 acres of grapes in Texas, there are more than 30 different varieties grown last year. Knowing all of this, selecting factors to help aid in site selection, no matter the grape variety, became the main focus of this project. A multi-criteria evaluation followed by a weighted overlay model was chosen. I broke the project up into 6 phases, each shown in a separate color here. Since Texas lacks the amount of viticultural data that most wine growing regions have, the bulk of the project was spent researching and comparing analysis in order to determine criteria suitable for the study region. This slide shows a list of all the tools I used over the course of the analysis. All geoprocessing was done using ArcGIS 10.7 and the analysis, data management, geocoding, and spatial analyst toolboxes. The model looked something like this. 15 potential factors were considered, and all of these had to be researched and analyzed. Grapes are very resilient and can grow in most any type of soil. Without specifying grape varietals for site selection, we could easily eliminate particle size and soil type as factors. Next, it was discovered the climate data collected was too coarse of a resolution at 800 meters, and even when local weather station data was retrieved, there was still too little variation for reclassification inside of our study region. This meant growing degree days, precipitation, and temperature data sets were found not useful in the weighted overlay model. This isn't as bad as it sounds though, and I'll explain why in a bit. Finally, elevation, frost-free days, and soil pH layers were found to have little pertinent data variability, and what they did have was redundant. These layers were also removed to make the model more precise. This left 7 remaining variables, shown here in teal, for the weighted overlay model. These layers were ranked according to available local expert knowledge and comparison research of other suitability analyses. The 7 remaining factors were enough to determine the site suitability for viticulture in the Fredericksburg AVA. I've left off the land use data set because it was a simple reclassification. Areas deemed as open water, wetlands, and urban development were not suitable for vineyards. These areas were not included in the weighted overlay map algebra. The aspect layer in the top left is doing a big job in this model. Not only is it defining the compass direction of the downward slope, but it's also stepping in to fill the role of many of the climate variables. Aspect has a direct impact on overall temperature, frost-free days, growing degree days of a site. As a result, it played a key role and was given the highest weight of 20 in the overlay model. The top middle layer depicts available water storage, and it played a similar pivotal role. Soil moisture is one of the most important aspects for site suitability. This layer indicates how much moisture is available for the roots under the ground. The more, the better. The top right map depicts drainage class for all the soils in the region. This is a crucial element for site selection, but all the soils shown here are favorable. The layer indicates how much moisture is available. Only highly suitable and moderately suitable areas existed. This layer had a lower ranking in the model for this reason. Flooding frequency on the bottom left correlates also to soil moisture and crop survivability. Flood-prone regions were deemed unsuitable for grape growing and were excluded from the weighted overlay raster calculator. Vineyards have to have slope. The middle map depicts the slope. It helps keep them both warm in the winter and cool in the summer. It helps prevent disease by moving air across the fruit and drying excess moisture. It allows rain to flow quickly through the site and prevent flooding. There are ideal slope levels, and these were accounted for in the model. Finally, we come to the solar radiation map in the bottom right. This factor, while not always predominant in analysis, played a huge role in this one, in ours. It also directly affects all the climate variables, and too little or too much solar radiation greatly affects the overall taste of wine. Here's where I ran into a bit of a hurdle. There's plenty of data about minimum solar radiation levels, but nothing I could find indicating maximum thresholds. Most wine growing regions never experience too much solar radiation, but one area does. The Catena Institute in Argentina studies this issue specifically in cooperation with UC Davis and other organizations. I read all the reports I could find, but was still unable to pinpoint a maximum solar threshold. I contacted the Institute in July, but have yet to hear back from anyone. I'm moving on. I set a maximum threshold using histogram data and very liberal estimations based on existing research. I would love to update the project one day with an actual maximum threshold. I ended up running 5 different scenarios to discover the model most suited for the study region. The first 2 times I knew aspect and available water storage would be the most important, but I played with the weights for slope and solar radiation layers. I figured out by scenario 3, areas classified as unsuitable were still in my map algebra and were negatively affecting my results. I went back and restricted those unsuitable areas. This meant they stayed unsuitable in the finished product, but didn't impact the raster calculator when it calculated other areas for suitability. After a few more iterations, I ended up with the map you see here, scenario 5. Based on all of the input data, the final model found 73% of the AVA to be suitable for viticulture. One key thing I learned from all the research and what the results show is this region was deemed an American viticultural area for a reason. You could plant grapes just about anywhere here as long as you account for flood-prone regions, low-lying areas, high elevations, and avoid southern and western-facing slope aspects. 20% of the study area is highly suitable for wine growing, but let's compare the results to existing vineyards and see how they stack up. So the region claims to have 35 wineries and vineyards, 50 if you count the tasting rooms, but many of these are more of destination locations versus actual operating vineyards. 12 claimed to be vineyards, but after visual assessment, only 7 are growing grapes on site. A lot of these places import grapes even from other locations in Texas. These 7 are the ones we'll compare. As you can see, most of the vineyards fall within areas deemed suitable by the weighted overlay model. The one vineyard that stands out is in the center called Barren Creek. This vineyard is unsuitable because it exists in a part of a region classified as developed open from the land usage layer. It's too close to urban development, but this site chose that for a reason. It's one of those destination locations more than a working vineyards. The only trellises that exist here occur between the main road and between the main structure and the road, except for a small addition of new trellises in the back of the property. These vines are more for ambiance than they are for anything else, but maybe they are turned into wine. The rest of the vineyards, to my surprise, almost all fall within suitable areas. There are a few pink areas here and there, but most of those are existing roads or structures and could technically be cropped out of these polygons. The one area remaining that would still have pink areas is the largest on the far right, Augusta Vin. It's also the largest vineyard in the region. One thing I learned when comparing the results to the existing vineyards is owners are willing to compromise a bit of prime land in exchange for proximity to roads and other tourist destinations. A future study could incorporate a buffer to represent this as an additional criteria. In conclusion, all the objectives we set out to meet in the beginning were met. We defined which factors were going to be most suitable for site selection. We performed the multi-criteria evaluation and we completed the weighted overlay analysis. The project could get better if we were to refine with finer detailed climate data or grape varietal data. It would also be better if we could add the max solar radiation threshold. If I could do this all over again, I probably would include a distance buffer as a factor, and any data that is shown in this project should still you should always still take into account local site parameters, specifically soil, climate, and Pierce's disease and other hazards in the area. And that's all I've got. Any questions?